Our girl is destitute.
What conspiracy theory do you have?
You're the Feyre.
I'm Feyre. He hates Tamlin. He's also a bit of a petty bitch.
And yet, she decides, let me just shoot my shot and see it. I'm like, girl. Hello.
Hello, Surreal Squad.
Hi, Surreal Squad. We just
Hi.
came off a hour-long conversation in the middle of our break, truly talking about everything under the sun.
Oh gosh, wow. We cried, we laughed,
We theorized.
We're not kidding. We legit
Yeah.
did all of those things after we already recorded the spoiler-free episode, so
And having a 2-hour conversation before that one.
exactly. So we're having a true Corryn and Ariel 6-hour chat kind of day.
Oh, yeah. It's great.
We love. It's fun.
We're so back.
We're so back, baby. We're so back.
Not that we ever left.
I
but
know, really. But wow. Okay. So chapters 23 and 24.
Yeah.
So
We're going to ping pong a lot. I think.
We're going to ping pong a lot. So yeah. So I dubbed chapter 23 the gift of Fey sight.
Yeah.
And then I dubbed chapter 24 as the servants and the head.
Ooh.
I think
intriguing.
I'm getting really good at chapter titles.
I
have
love
to
it.
say.
As someone who, like, my Achilles heel as a writer is coming up with titles.
Yeah.
Like, I like people who can come up with titles that are like good. I'm just like, you are truly the best amongst us.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be a lot of ping-ponging in this episode, mainly just because I feel like these two chapters are pretty much the biggest discussion is the glamour.
We have a lot of questions.
We have so many questions. There's a lot of fucking I don't know if I want to say loopholes, but just
There's
holes.
Some inconsistencies.
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you want to give like a synopsis of the two chapters before we dive in? So we can like.
Absolutely. So chapter 23, we are in another enchanted forest, as sweet baby Feyre says. And basically, Tamlin ends up, kissing her eyeballs.
As we decided last
As we've
episode.
decided. No, yeah. He kisses her eyelids, and all of a sudden, she can now see the world with Fey sight and Fey ears and kind of all this idea.
It's questionable if it's that, if that's just how Prithian actually is, and we're gonna talk about it.
So yeah, so there's that, and they have a cute little nap time together after she the willow sings her to sleep. And then chapter 24 is basically her waking up and realizing that Alice basically looks like a short, squat tree lady, right? And
which I love.
And there's a ton of servants in the manor that she's never seen before. And then it ends with this head being kind of dropped off in the spring court on a spike. Yeah. And it's obvious that it is from the night court, which I have many things to discuss with that one as well.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of the synopsis of these two chapters. And I'm sure, as you noticed, if you did the reading, it's very short.
Yes.
But there is a lot to unpack here.
A lot. And actually, if you will, if you're cool with this, I would actually like to start talking about some of the stuff in chapter 24 because I think it's going to have bearing on what we discuss in chapter 23.
Sure.
So I have a big note.
Okay.
For myself in chapter 24. What are the fucking parameters of Tamlin's glamour, right?
Yeah.
So I have a few quotes I want to discuss because there are some inconsistencies, I think, with the way Tamlin is explaining this.
Yeah.
So on page 213, Feyre says, a glamour. That's what Tamlin had said he wore. So Tamlin's wearing the glamour.
Yes.
His fairy sight had stripped away the glamours I'd been seeing. But why bother to glamour everything? Okay, so she's establishing that seemingly Tamlin has put a glamour on everything except for Feyre. Okay?
Yeah.
So then on page 215, she brings up how she could see the Naga and the Puka and the Surreal, and also the fairy whose wings were ripped off. She says, why didn't the glamour apply to them? And Tamlin's answer to this is, they're not members of my court, so my glamour didn't keep a hold on them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, same page, she brings up the adder, and she says, so if I were to encounter the adder again, would I actually see it? And Tamlin says, yes, and it wouldn't be pleasant. She says, you said it didn't see me at the time, and it certainly doesn't seem like a member of your court. Why? He says, because I threw a glamour over you when we entered the garden. I've done all I can to keep you invisible to creatures like the adder and worse. Okay? So we're establishing, basically, Tamlin, of course, according to Feyre's understanding of everything, Tamlin glamored his entire court. But then when the adder came, before that, anyone outside of the spring court is not glamored.
Yeah.
But then when the adder came, he did glamour Feyre, so that the adder couldn't see him.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So here's where I'm confused / maybe there's holes in all this. So to me, we know there's a curse, right?
Yes.
That has dulled Tamlin's powers.
Yes.
To me, it seems like a lot of fucking magic.
Yeah.
To glamour his entire court. Wouldn't you just glamour Feyre? Right? And we know, like, he could in theory do that, like, and make it so that she sees things differently, because he glamored her family.
Yeah.
To not remember him coming and think she's with her aunt, right?
Yeah.
So I would think it would be much easier and way less magical power usage for him to glamour Feyre.
Yeah, I agree.
And this is kind of where I'm going to tell you my theory.
Okay.
I think he glamored Feyre, and he's not. I think he's kind of lying, and he's saying he glamored, or hinting at he glamored the entire court, and so that way she wouldn't feel violated. But then he also admits to glamoring her during
when
the
she
whole
was in
adder
danger.
incident, when she was in danger.
Right.
Which then also begs the question: can you put a glamour on a glamour? Which I think you probably could in theory. But I think he glamored her, and he's not telling her, especially because in chapter 23 he does the whole eyeball thing, kisses her eyes, and then suddenly she can see everything. So why would he need to do something physically to her for the glamour to drop, right?
Oh, unless she's the one who's glamored.
Exactly.
Huh. Yeah.
And I don't know if we ever get an answer to this.
I don't ever think we do, honestly.
I don't think so.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's not like the intricacies of like the depths in which we have reached, it's not wildly important really to the story. I mean, okay, I know.
Story-wise, you're correct.
Yes. Story plot wise, it's not wildly important to the intricacies. No. But I mean, I know exactly where your brain was going there, that like it is important in the sense of the sort of overall psyche and like what is happening in the relationship with Tamlin and Feyre. It is important in that sense. Exactly. Because like I think these whole 2 chapters from a reread standpoint, I mean, we're getting to the real rough portions of this book, because like, the reread for these 2 chapters, you're literally seeing the slow acceptance of Tamlin hiding things to protect her. Like because you even see Feyre be like, I mean, I get it. Like she literally says like, because I'd been a cowering human, that's why. Tamlin knew I would have locked myself in this room and never come out if I'd seen them all for their true selves.
Yep.
And it's just showing the beginning of, I mean, like it's already been slowly happening, but it's really showing this like justification of his actions and how it's okay that he hid something from me because he's trying to protect me. And like she is participating in the gaslighting without like, she's not consciously doing it. It's just this like slow acceptance. And when you start accepting this quote unquote smaller things the bigger things get more accepted. And it's just we're this is the, I think, the more an obvious moment of like of him putting her in a box. He is slowly putting her in this place. Because also, I actually don't I think, yes, if Feyre had, and we talked about this in the spoiler-free episode, but I think if when Feyre had first shown up and all these fucking fairies were around, I do think it would have freaked her out.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
for not for long.
Exactly. And if anything, I almost feel like the night with that fairy that comes in and dies.
Yeah.
If anything, that to me should have been the night that Tamlin was like, fuck, I should stop hiding all of these from her because she clearly like will be fine.
Yes. Well, and she even says, we talked about in the spoiler-free episode, before she says the thing about like Tamlin knew, and like you said, keywording, Tamlin knew, even though he'd only known her for like 2 days by the time he made this decision.
Exactly.
So there's that. But before she says that, she says, when she doesn't realize that the fairy's Alice, she says something like, I definitely would have remembered her because I would have painted her.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like she is definitely being gaslit and like falling into it in an understandable way without even knowing it. And so it's like this whole glamour just feels so non-consensual, and it feels like it's like that thing. I think we may have talked about this last week in regards to like the whole just consent conversation, but like it's like it reminds me of when you have like a parent or like someone who's a protective figure in your life and they don't tell you something to protect you.
Yeah.
And it's like they're assuming, kind of the worst is what it is. Like he's assuming the worst for her and isn't giving her the ability to prove that she's not like that, And it's a horrible foundation for a relationship.
Yeah. Well, and it's just it's an awful foundation because it leaves open this space of acceptance of like deceiving for a certain reason. And it's like it's allowing for this to be okay for like something in the future. And I just it's very icky. And also like, Tamlin had good intentions.
Yeah.
But like, what about the respect of his staff to Feyre and the other way around? Like he let her walk around like an idiot.
Yeah.
Like the whole Puka conversation back and forth is just so, it really pissed me off this time. Because I was just like, do not fucking laugh at her.
Right.
Don't fucking laugh at her.
That was like one of the few times when like Lucian, like his quips, I'm like,
fuck off.
It
bro.
just reminded me why it took me a little while to get on board with Lucian.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Like, well, and also like Puka aside, there are moments, I know we joked about like, the whole like bathroom thing in the last episode, but like even just like there are moments Feyre needs to have some privacy, like her painting room. Like, have there been times where she's been painting and there's been a fairy there and she didn't know it? Like that's really fucking invasive, right?
Yeah, but also just like to walk around and think you are alone, you behave in a very different way.
Completely.
And it's just, and even like, we joke around about it in a spoiler episode, like a few episodes back. I think it might have been the like Papa episode of like, she's asking Tamlin all these like really serious questions about the blight. And Tamlin's looking around all like, and that's because there's fairies around and she doesn't know. And it's just so uncomfortable to like think of how long she's been existing with people like viewing her. But also I'm serious when I mean like the respect of his staff to Feyre. Like it's like the minute that he started really feeling something for her, he should have taken it off, which maybe that's what we're saying. That's why he finally decides to do this, because he's like really feeling something for her. Because if he really likes her and respects her, then he wants the staff to respect her too, which means she needs to know they're fucking there.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, how long has she been going around completely ignoring all these other creatures?
Right.
Like,
Although, to be
it's
fair, a little bit fair, I think it's implied they know.
they know. Yes,
Yeah,
it does
so there is that.
like it's implied that they know because, yeah, there's that whole moment where, like, um, she tries not to look at some of the, like, clearly non-high fae fairies because they're not, like,
Yeah.
used to her
Oh,
attention,
and
and
they're like,
so
"Oh."
and they're like, "Oh, she can see me now,"
But then it also brings up the question of, like, so those staff members knew that she can't see them, but Alice didn't seem to know that she looked different to Feyre.
Well, I wonder if Alice knew that the glamour had been broken.
Oh, it
Yeah.
could just be that.
It could just
Yeah,
be that
you're
she
right.
had no idea that
Yeah,
all of a sudden she can see how you really look. And
right.
also, it's just that's the other thing we actually talked about in the spoiler-free section 2 of just, like, once he had taken the glamour off of her or whatever is that happens, why the fuck did he not warn her that everything at the manor was gonna be different?
Because this man has no foresight,
Like,
that's why.
he really does not. He is absolutely
No.
a, like, moment by moment character. Like, it's so
Truly.
frustrating. But yeah, like, this is like it's just it does not build a foundation of trust, which, I was hesitant in saying that just because the way their relationship starts is, like, very bizarre. It's very weird,
Sure.
but I say that this just breeds this, like, Feyre becoming this sort of uh subservient, like, follow along, trust this powerful man. Like,
Yep.
we are seeing the beginnings of how she gets into the position that she gets in Mist and Fury. I am not
Completely.
placing blame upon Feyre at all. I
No.
want that to be
No, no.
very clear. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we're seeing the beginnings of Tamlin slowly kind of bringing her to this space. Because a lot of people
Yes.
talk about how Feyre, they feel like she's, like, weak in the beginning of Mist and Fury.
Yeah.
And I this is my argument to that.
Yeah.
Of that, it's not that she's weak. It's that she was
She was worn down.
slowly worn down or just slowly shown it was slowly picked away bit by bit
Yes.
of like
Yes.
oh yeah, you know what, but Tamlin was right. I would have
Yeah.
freaked out if I had seen all these fairies. And even us right now, we've already said, like, yeah, I mean, he is right. There is a level of that is correct. But it's a
Yeah.
very, very dangerous road when you start letting someone pick and choose the information that you get to know about something. Like, it
You know,
just gets very dangerous.
you know what it is we talked about this in the last spoiler episode. And the more I've thought about it since, I just think it's really fucking true. Is like I really do agree with you in that I think this series, but specifically Thorns and
Mm.
Roses, is Sarah J. Maas's love letter to people who have been in emotionally abusive relationships.
Yeah.
And I think it's a thing where, because yeah, I see a lot of these conversations too of saying like Feyre is weak, blah blah blah, and I really would caution people of saying that
Yep.
because if you really break it down, like I think Sarah J. Maas's point kind of is anyone
Yep.
anyone could get into an abusive relationship when it's especially when it's something like this where it's like it's not just like no one is really going to get into a relationship where it's like immediately. I mean, I guess some people, but like it's rare that people get into abusive relationships where it's like immediately abusive.
Yeah.
And if it is, there's usually like a reason, like a very particular reason why, but the vast majority of abusive relationships, it's a slow process. It
Yeah.
reminds me a lot of like, I'm a big true crime person and
Mhm.
like I've studied a lot of cults for
Yeah.
like, you know, because I find them interesting, some for projects. And it is truly a thing where like once you've studied enough cults, you realize everyone is susceptible to a cult out there at some
Yeah.
point in their life. Like doesn't mean you're going to join one, just like doesn't mean you're going to get into an abusive relationship, but like the whole point is like they prey on vulnerabilities, and it's the same with abusive relationships. Like Tamlin intentionally or unintentionally is preying on her vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part it is unintentional. I think
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
I think he really is as we saw in the last chapters, I think he has found someone who he thinks understands him, and I do think she does. You know, the whole
Yeah.
like duty to family sort of thing, but instead of supporting her in the way she needs to be
Yeah.
supported,
Yeah.
he's just kind of not really healing himself,
Yeah.
and instead putting all that onto Feyre and trying to fix her like we've talked about,
Yeah.
instead of fixing himself.
Yes. That's the other thing that I think is like, I know you and I are together on this, and I think is something that I know we really want to put out there, is that like, I don't believe that Tamlin is consciously
No.
doing this stuff. I believe that Tamlin turns into a true aware abuser
Mm,
when she basically says, "Do not ever lock me into this house."
yeah. Yep. That's when it's
I
blatantly
think
clear.
that is when he is consciously making the choice
Yep.
that, and even in his head, he is justifying it because it's for her safety. But
Yeah.
I truly believe, I think everything up into that, it's like a subconscious protecting because he's dealing with the trauma from under the mountain. But I think
Yes.
Tamlin becomes an actual bad guy when she clearly states, "Do not ever do that to me."
Yeah.
And then he does. And then he
Yep.
is physically violent towards her. And
Yes.
that is when I think it turns. Yeah, I knew you'd agree with me on that. Of just like, I just feel like so much of this is a subconscious, like thinking it's the greatest of intentions.
Yeah.
But that is the slippery slope of all of this. And honestly, I keep writing this down in my notes so many times, but of just like, it's the tragedy of Tamlin. Like,
Yes.
it's so sad because he's just stuck in this like headspace of like, I must protect, I must like make sure that she is comfortable in the idea of how I think she feels that she would be comfortable. He's
Yeah.
not really taking into account her feelings as a person. And that's the subconscious abusing that I think
Yeah.
is happening.
Absolutely. Well, and also we got to remember, and again, this is not an excuse. This is just like psychoanalyzing Tamlin.
Yeah.
I think his plan the whole time up until like the last few chapters was, I just need to get some human girl that I don't care about.
Yeah.
And why, to be fair, why would he care about someone who murdered his friend or just any Fae,
Right.
right? I just need some human woman to fall in love with me, and that's it. Like, I'm going to wash my hands of it after
Yeah.
that, right? I don't think he ever anticipated actually falling in love with that person,
Yeah.
right? And I think he is caught off guard, and I think that's where a lot of these lies come from, is like he lied to break the curse,
Right.
right? I don't think he anticipated. I think this is one of the big examples of seeing how his lies are catching up to him.
Yeah.
He didn't anticipate actually falling in love with her, and now he has to like cover up for the cover up, because remember, he already can't tell her about the curse. He has to say it's a blight and all this stuff. The other thing, when Rhys arrives to the Spring Court, and Rhys mentions like, I haven't seen you in 49 years, meaning Tamlin has not been really with any of the other courts for 49 years.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
he's
a long time.
interacted, it's a long time. He's interacted, with like some of his friends from his court, some of, I'm sure, the villagers, but like that's really different. Like,
Yeah.
he's a high lord. He's not going to the pub with like, the villagers in town.
Right.
Like, and he's also had to watch a bunch of his friends die. The only one he has left is Lucian. So it's like, it's again not an excuse. It's more of a like understanding of, this is how Tamlin got here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think he uses it to justify his actions, but they're just not justifiable. Like, there's so there's so much worse. There's so much worse that could be happening to him. And we say all the time with Rhys, like, so much worse happens to Rhys. He doesn't do, I mean, he does some bad stuff for sure, but he doesn't manipulate Feyre into some, relationship, like in this way, at least. Like,
yeah. I mean, like, basically, well, and what's weird too is that when you really think about it, I don't think Tamlin actually had an intention of wanting to change who Feyre was.
no, I think he just started doing it,
Exactly.
you know?
I don't think that he actually like wanted to, but I would also argue that there's a level of Feyre that he just doesn't know.
Yeah.
Because what I think is bizarre is Rhys pretty quickly with her knows she is someone who needs action,
Yeah.
right? Like
Gives her those
very
the tunic
early,
and pants.
yeah, like very exactly. Gives her the, pants and all that stuff. And it's like, yes, okay, they're mates. But as we all know, that doesn't fucking mean that you're gonna actually love them and you're gonna know what they actually need as a like,
No.
yes, you'll feel when they're in pain. You'll feel
Yes.
sure. But in reality, like Rhys already could clock what kind of person she was. And I think that's what's interesting is that I think Tamlin stays in this space of like the idea that he has of her because he has this line at the end of chapter 23.
Yeah.
Right? When they're taking their little nap and she thinks she dreams it, right?
Yep. I know
But
exactly
he
what you're gonna
says,
say.
"You're exactly as I dreamed you'd be too."
Yes.
And when you first read this line, it's very sweet and it's kind of precious, right?
Yeah.
When you read this line from a spoiler headspace,
It's so dark.
it's very sinister.
Yeah.
And again, I don't believe that Tamlin means it in a sinister way. I believe he means it in a very, very sweet way. But I think what happens here is in Tamlin's mind, she stays this girl in the enchanted forest forever.
Forever.
This little vision he has of her right here as this kind of like, yes, like she's sassy and she's strong, but at the end of the day, she is going to kind of like give him what he needs.
Yep.
And she's going to look at him as if he is the most magical thing in the entire world and he is the best thing ever and she is going to like follow his lead. I think this line shows that he takes a little mental picture and this is who she stays as to him.
I just saw something really bad.
Ugh, what?
You know what he wants? He basically wants a dog. Like,
Oy.
he wants someone who's going to be loyal to him, who's going to think that, like, he's the most incredible person in the world, who's going to do what he says, who he can lock up when he needs to. Like, he kind of wants a dog for a partner. Well, and also think about it this way. Rhys is often described as feline. Like, Feyre's a cat. She has her boundaries. She wants to do what she wants on her terms. And I think that's why she ends up with Rhys, right? Like, he's very similar. Like, they are very much two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. Couple things before we move into like solidly into chapter 24 that I want to bring up. I think it fits in with what we're talking about in terms of like Tamlin's expectations of Feyre. So going back to my theory of Feyre is the one actually glamored. He's telling her like, I'll show you how, and I think this is proof of it. He says like, I'll show you how we see the world as Fae, right? I don't think he actually is. I think he's just basically unglamoring her and like what she sees, like hearing the willows and experiencing the world differently. I think that's just how Prithian is, and I think other humans would see it that way if they weren't glamored. And part of the reason I think this is because when she does eventually turn into a fae at the end of this book, she talks about, I'm pretty sure, her senses being heightened and all that stuff.
Yeah, she does.
So I think this is just him removing the glamour.
Huh. See, thank you, because you've actually solved it. Because I had this thing where I was like, well, if he had given her the gift of Fae sight and Fae hearing, then it wouldn't be such a thing later when she gets true Fae hearing and Fae sight. Yeah, that she like all of a sudden like hears all these things. I mean, and it could be that we could be the classic like kind of book talk thing where like maybe we're digging deeper than Sarah really ever expected anybody to. You know, I'm really with you on this, of that she was just the one who was glamored the whole time.
Well, and also just thinking about it from like a writer standpoint, right? Like if we're thinking about metaphors here, you know, we talked about this I think a little bit last week with the mask, right? Like that's a very clear metaphor for he is masking the type of person he really is. The glamour, same thing. He's like glamoring everything around him to like make her fall in love with a version of him that he really isn't, right? And the spring court too. So yeah, I think that's him dropping the glamour. Now, so they're talking about, you know, he's like, I can show you how we see the world as Fae, right?
Yeah.
And he says, I can make you see it. She says, how? He says, every gift comes with a price. I frowned and he grinned. A kiss. And I just wrote, ew. He then goes on to say, I'm one of the high fae. We don't give anything without gaining something from it, which we know is not true. We find out later, like that's like, and I think this is like so good with her writing, like Sarah J. Maas's writing is like, there is like folklore out there where it's like kind of like fae deal in that way. They're very tricky. It's like a sort of like, you give me one thing, I'll give you this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I think like upon a first read, you're like, oh, this must be like a fae rule, right? Kind of like how we thought the lying, they can't lie, you know, is a fae type of rule. But in reality, like we see Rhys do this all the time where he gives so much of himself to others, not just Feyre, but his people, his friends, and expects nothing back in return, right?
Yeah, but
okay. Yeah.
I think he legit though is more talking about like magical gifts, like magical deals, because they are basically making a deal bargain here. They're making a bargain.
Are they though?
Or well, not a bargain, but like he's giving a magical like gift. If you know, in right.
Yeah.
Right. But like in this little kind of space, like he is using some of his power to give her something. And I actually do think that is true. Because like, you know, with Rhys, right, she has to make a bargain with him.
Right.
And, you know, there's kind of all these other things. Because also the reason why I highlighted this line is that this line to me is also why it's such a big deal. The High Lords give part of their power to bring Feyre back. Because there was in the moment actually nothing expected in return. In fact, it was them paying her off for a favor that she did.
But here's my counterpoint.
Yeah.
We see a number of times with multiple characters that are fae, they'll like, for instance, heal someone's wounds with their magic. They don't ever get anything back. There's no bargain made. I think this is more about Tamlin's psychology, honestly.
I definitely think this is a sign of how Tamlin view things. And I think it could potentially go back to what we've discussed in past episodes of this sort of like antiquated viewpoint that Tamlin has of what being a high fae and a high lord means in Prythian.
He's a tit for tat kind of guy.
Yeah.
Like he is keeping the score, and it's just so
dude,
so gross.
It's
like,
so gross.
Well, and it's so funny because like on page 212, I think it's right before he says the dream line, Feyre says, as she's like kind of drifting off to sleep, she says, this was such a lovely dream. I'd never slept so wonderfully before. And I just wrote, all dreams must come to an end. And hers is about to. Like, next chapter, the dream is going to climax in a way.
Yeah.
And then it's going to collapse.
Well, you know, another thing that I think is really fun.
Yeah.
Is, so the glamour's taken off, right? And she looks at Tamlin, right? And she was like, it was Tamlin, but not. Rather, it was the Tamlin I dreamed of. His skin gleamed with golden sheen, and around his head glowed a circlet of sunshine, and his eyes, like, you know, devastatingly handsome, captivating, powerful beyond belief. And then I wrote in my notes, Feyre thought Rhys was beautiful while still glamored.
Mic drop. Like, yeah.
Feyre thought Rhys was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen.
Yeah.
I don't really know if I have to say much more. I feel like that kind of speaks for itself.
I can tell you, like, earlier today when I was reading ahead, like, I got to the part where he comes to the spring court, and she still thinks he's just as beautiful, even with the glamour dropped.
Yeah.
Like, it's it speaks for itself.
It really does.
You know?
I love learning about how, like, wherever you work in the manor, that's like the mask that you got, right? So the people in the garden have like insect masks and like all this stuff. And like, I also love the descriptions of some of them. Like, I just think it's like, what a cool imagery. Like, there's so much life happening. And you know, some of them, like, they have like wings and like they're really tall or really short, or it's like, I don't know, just I love like just this is very cool. But I love this moment.
Stream.
Yeah. When she said, Lucien mercifully appeared like Lucien. I didn't ask whether that was because Tamlin had informed him to put up a better glamour or because he didn't bother trying to be something he wasn't.
Well, okay, this brings up a really interesting point then, that like, yeah, that then indicates that Tamlin did glamour, but then see, it's really hard to tell because then it's on Lucien putting up his own glamour.
Mm-hmm.
So then are all the Fae putting up their own glamour?
No, so I actually think that this goes in line with what you're saying.
Okay.
Because in my mind, it's like, let's say that Tamlin did do the glamour on her. Right. I think Tamlin still wears a glamour, even if she doesn't have one. So like, so Tamlin almost has like a double glamour when it comes to Feyre, right?
And they say Rhys is the one way too into his looks.
Yeah. But it's more what I want to discuss is I love this idea that Lucien just never wears a glamour, ever. And of just because he didn't bother trying to be something he wasn't. I just feel like the language there is a little shocking, actually, with how we're supposed to feel about Tamlin right now.
Right.
And so, you know, it's just a little like, you know, Lucien is always, you see is what you get with Lucien.
Well, and it brings up an interesting point because, you know, he is wearing a fox mask. And I think that's really symbolic. And again, like, I know this is reading ahead, but in the chapter I'm in the middle of, like, Rhys even says, like, fox mask, very fitting. It fits you, Lucien, right? We know foxes are tricky, right? And like Lucien has his moments of like, I wouldn't say being tricky, but he's really good. I think this is what makes him such a good emissary, is he's really good at being selective with what he tells people. Yeah. Right. And I think that's a big reason why his mask is a fox mask. But it's this thing of like, in a weird way, I think on the surface level, Lucien is a little, for lack of a better term, tricky, right? Mm-hmm. But I think who Lucien is actually, he's one of the more genuine characters.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Because like when you actually, like, Feyre gets to know Lucien pretty well. And even though he'll still, you know, have these quips with her, I think that is part of who Lucien really is, right? So yeah, that's really interesting that he wasn't glamored. Yeah. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while now.
Yeah. Although I just had a thought. Are all these fairies just glamoring themselves?
No, that's what I was saying earlier is like, but then that brings up the question of like how
did
much
he
magic
did he just ask his own court to glamour themselves while Feyre was around?
No. Because then he would have had to ask them to unglamour themselves.
No, because then when he gave her Fae sight,
right? Oh,
and is that why?
But then it goes back to the question of like, but then why is the Fae sight she gets when she becomes Fae different? Right?
Just because she's a true Fae,
I guess.
You know, I don't know.
Yeah. So, but the whole thing is like even Fae, like when Lucien glamours Feyre when Rhys comes, like there are certain glamours even Fae can't see past.
True.
See, this is the inconsistency, and I think it's purposeful. I think it's Tamlin basically lying.
Yeah.
I'm as of now, until we get proven otherwise, I'm sticking to my theory that Feyre is the one who was glamored.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that Lucien, and maybe Lucien simply just requested that Tamlin didn't glamour him. Maybe Lucien has his own magic about him that like makes it so you can't really glamour him. Like, I don't know. But
well, I mean, and you know, she was like, I didn't ask whether that was because Tamlin had informed him to put up a better glamour. Like maybe he just has a better one on. Yeah. Or it's just from the beginning, he's just been like, don't just
don't do it.
Don't
Yeah,
bother with
that feels like a Lucian move.
Me too.
Honestly. Yeah. Yeah. I really want to talk about this bullshit Night Court and anti-Night Court propaganda that they're fucking spewing.
Let's get into it. Let's get
Doing my
into
boy
it.
dirty.
Yeah, because tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am.
Yeah.
Pretty sure we find out later that this is actually one of Rhys's spies that Amarantha finds and kills and puts a brand on him to send a message to Rhys.
I'm not sure because, again, I know this is ahead, but where I just got to in 2 chapters from this one, Rhys does say, "Did you get my little gift?" And he's referring to the severed head. But it still could be that, and he's like kind of covering for it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing is like, and we're going to find all this out. You know, there's a lot of things that Rhys doesn't necessarily do or does do, but like in this way that's like we were talking about before recording, right? Like where he'll the fairy who Amarantha makes like him destroy his mind. Rhys does it really quickly to give him a quick, as painless as possible death, and Amarantha gets mad about it, right? So he does a bunch of things either like secretly or like things he can't avoid doing, but he does it in the most humane way he possibly
can. Yeah.
So it could be, but I will say, the part where I just got to, he does say it was a gift from him. So who knows?
Well, yeah, he's gonna say that.
He could have just delivered it.
Because I feel like it's more like she found the spy, she did that, threw it at him, and made him take it to the Supreme Court or like something like that.
That's very possible.
Yeah.
That's very possible.
Yeah.
Is it fucked up when they say a mountain with 3 stars about the sigil? I'm like, Ramiel. The most dark way to introduce Ramiel, but
I know
still Ramiel.
I know, but me too. I like just hearing about the sigil. I was like, yay! Oh, how fun!
I mean, it's a literal blood right, I suppose.
Yeah. It is very
too soon.
It is very blood righty. But also, I love it because we're getting the quote that TikTok just loves doing videos with. When, the Night Court does what it wants. Like, I love all the ones that people have this up, and it'll be like the boys like dancing at Rita's.
At the club,
at the club or like whatever. Like those ones just make me laugh so when they're like they're all sadistic killers, like they delight in torture of every kind, and then they just like show the boys just like getting drunk at Rita's. Or like I just I love this so much because, and I think there's a reason why so many of us in the reread love this quote because when you finally meet all of them, like yes, I do often forget that like Cassian is like, he's not a warlord, but like he's a very intense general. He's a general that many people are extremely scared of. Azriel is a spy and a torturer. So like it's really funny because we do kind of and then Rhys can literally turn people into mist. So it's like we get really caught up in the inner circle of like how sweet our boys are, but we forget actually like how like the reputation that they have put off about themselves and earned. Honestly, some of it is definitely earned. These are scary fucking dudes.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. Like, this is going to be a weird comparison, but bear with me. So David and I may have mentioned this before. We're finally doing a full rewatch through of our favorite show, Lost. And the other day, we were like, oh, if you could only use the characters from Lost to cast the characters and actor, who would be who?
Yeah.
And we decided, I'm sorry to those who have not watched Lost, but to those who have, you'll enjoy this. The character Saeed would absolutely be Az, because Saeed, he's an Iraqi man who was a torturer. And, this is, it came out in 2004. There's a lot of problematic shit about Lost. But the reason I bring this up is Saeed's whole journey in Lost is like, that's his introduction, is like, we find out pretty quickly, like, he tortured a lot of fucking people.
Wow.
But he ends up becoming like one of the most beloved characters in that show. And like, frankly, like rewatching, this is my first like full rewatch since I was a teenager. Like, he is one of my favorite characters. Truly, like, not for nothing, but he is like the hottest one of them all. Like, no, and it's like, I think that's the reason I bring it up is like, and specifically why we chose him for Az is like, yes, Az and Cassian and Rhys. And also, let's not forget the ladies too, like Amryn and even more.
Yeah.
Not as much more, but I'm sure she's done some stuff. You know, they've done bad stuff, right? Yeah. But I think the good really outweighs the bad. I mean, we'll see in these rereads, but a lot of the reason they do those things, at least with Rhys, you know, and Cassian, we've yet really to find out a ton about Az's backstory. I think that's coming in probably, if not book 6, a future book. Like, I think we're gonna get way more in depth with Az's backstory.
I was like, I mean, we know some stuff, which is like really heartbreaking and awful. But
yes, like the childhood stuff. I'm thinking more like teenage his torturing days. Yeah, I think, you know, unlike Tamlin, right, who he's only doing the things he does to uphold tradition, right, to uphold expectations of him. The Bat Boys, they do bad stuff, but it's almost always for kind of the better good for the most part. Like, they're, again, all the Under the Mountain stuff, Rhys is doing that shit because he's trying to protect everyone in Valeris. Yeah. Like, he knows I gotta make sure they don't find them. Like, we also got to remember the people he does hurt in the Night Court. Under the Mountain. It's pretty much like all high society. So like, it's not to say hurt people, but it's like he's not for the most part hurting like villagers or anything like that. So just the whole reputation of the Night Court of like, you know, they do what they want, right? They don't, like, they take it very seriously.
I was gonna say, like, they don't actually do, like, they do what they have to.
Exactly.
Right?
They do what they want shit. Like, my mind immediately went, well, you know, Ness and Cassie in the House of Wind, they did what they really wanted. You know, shit like that. Like, or getting drunk at Rita's. Like, it's really, like, a lot of it is really pure. Right?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, you bring up a good point of, like, there is a reason for the reputation. I think that reputation, honestly, has a lot more to do with Rhys's family.
And I feel like the reputation's one of those where it like precedes itself, where I think that it's one of those that it's sort of a snowball effect. You know, Rhys even says later that it's like he keeps Hewn City so people think that that's what the Night Court is. And so people basically just leave him the fuck alone. Yeah. Like neither Rhys or Tamlin really want to be like High Lord.
No.
But Rhys's way of dealing with that is by just like, I'm just going to create a really safe space for people to like come to. And then I'm just going to be like the guy about town.
Yeah.
You know, like
truly.
He hardcore uses this reputation to his advantage. But I do think sometimes we forget that some of this reputation is slightly earned. Yes. You know, but still, just this quote is like just so funny.
It's so good. The memes are so good. Well, and like, you know, one thing I'm realizing as we're having this discussion is like Rhys in his own way, like Tamlin, is upholding expectations of him. But the difference is Rhys isn't actually really doing most of those things. Like you said, he's having the Hewn City do it, or he is doing what he absolutely must in order to protect like literally people's lives, but doing it in the most humane way possible.
Yeah.
Versus Tamlin, who kind of just frankly cowers in the Spring Court for 49 years.
It's really funny how just like rereading it now, it's just like kind of funny because you're just like,
I know it is.
You're like, it's weird to say because a Fae died, got their head cut off, and like it's very brutal, but it's also just like when they descend into this little like, well, Night Court or just like these awful, which like, that is the reputation that the Inner Circle has been purposely putting out there into the ether. And we, you know, you mentioned how like the ladies are just as scary, but the thing is that no one outside of the Inner Circle knows that Mor and Amryn are his right hand people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's Cassian and Azriel are the sort of like the beards.
Oh my God. Yeah. Literally literally in Mor's case.
Yeah. But like they're the ones, they're the captains he puts kind of out in front of the world. But like, I think he even says how like technically Amryn is his second in command and then Mor is his third.
Yep. Yeah.
So like that's That's what I think is like always that I always forget about is like there's not many of the others in Prithian even know that is a thing.
No.
But yeah, this whole thing with the Night Court. But like I realized though, this made me I wanted to ask, and it's actually technically from chapter 23. But this whole so being a High Lord, even one with limited powers, this whole quote comes with the physical markers too. It's why I couldn't hide what I was becoming from my brothers, from anyone. So, okay, I asked this in the spoiler free, and I'm super fine with asking this again.
Yeah.
Y'all. So does magic choose the High Lords? I completely forgot this.
So I want to bring this up. Or I'm glad you brought this up because I want to talk about it. Okay, so the chapter, I forgot which one it was, but it was a previous chapter where Tamlin tells her his whole kind of family backstory.
Yeah.
I like rereading it, right? Having already read the books.
Yeah.
The way he described it made it seem like any one of his brothers could have been, or in him, could have been the next High Lord, right?
Right, because magic was going to choose it.
I remember the whole thing where he said, that's why I went off and joined my dad's warband, because I had no interest in becoming the High Lord. But I kind of, from what I remember him saying, I read it more as like, not so much because of the magic. He was afraid the magic would choose him, but he was afraid his brothers would see him as a threat, right? And I assumed that the only reason he became High Lord was because everyone else died, right?
Yeah, me too.
Same with Rhys, right? I mean, he is the only son of his parents, so there's that. But then, like, his dad dies, he becomes High Lord. So it's another one of those things where, like, I wouldn't say this is as big of an inconsistency as like the whole glamour talk, but like it did make me go like, huh, is this another selective truth, I guess you could call it, from Tamlin, of him basically saying like, oh yeah, I tried to not be High Lord, and then him later saying, oh well, the magic chose me. And then that begs the question, did his family know the magic chose him? When does the magic choose you? Is it when you're a baby? Is it when you're old? Like, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, so I found those pages. I never wanted my father's title. My brothers would have never let me live to adolescence if they had suspected that I did. So the moment I was old enough, I joined my father's warband and trained so that I might someday serve my father or whichever of my brothers inherited his title.
Right.
So I trained and fought for my father against whomever he told me to fight, and I would have been happy to leave the scheming to my brothers. But my power kept growing, and I couldn't hide it, not among our kind.
Okay. So he does mention it, but he's not clear.
No, and then he goes, fortunately or unfortunately, they were all killed by the High Lord of an enemy court. So clearly it's like right around where he was realizing that he had more power than he probably should.
Yeah.
Is when the family died.
Right. Very convenient timing for him.
Yeah, right. One thing that is also interesting, though, that there's a little bit of a hole, is that it says most High Lords are trained from birth in manners and laws in court warfare. Right. That feels like a little bit of a hole, because how do you know if someone is going to be the High Lord? And this could come into the thing of that most of these families, like, again, talk about another family who actually ended up having more kids than we've been led to believe is possible.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because at first I was like, well, Rhys's family too, but Rhys's mom's Illyrian, so it's right. I feel the Illyrians can have more kids, but Tamlin's mom is High Fae, presumably. 3, I mean, more reasonable than 7, right?
7, Jesus. When he says most High Lords are trained from birth and manners, it could just mean like most families only have one kid, or you would just train all the children to be prepped to be High Lord, and then once the power comes to being, then they'll be prepped and ready.
Right. But then, but when you think about the competition,
or in Fae, by the time you get close to when someone's chosen, the brothers have killed off all the other boys, so they're obviously going to be High Lord. Like, so I feel like just this line of, but my power kept growing and I couldn't hide it, not among our kind. So that makes me feel like you're born with a particular magic that makes you High Lord.
Yeah. Huh. I really hope we get some clarification on this at some point, whether in the books that are already existing or future books, because Speaking of Tamlin's family, I do want to
Yes.
talk about the whole slave quotes.
Oh, yeah.
So Feyre asks Tamlin about his dad's slaves. And she says, "Do you remember if they were happy to leave?" Tamlin shrugged. "Yes, yet they had never known freedom or known the seasons as you do. They didn't know what to do in the mortal world. But yes, most of them were very, very happy to leave." Which, like, that, it's actually like a really heartbreaking line to me, because it's like, imagine having freedom finally, but then you can't, like, you don't know how to adjust to the mortal world, to your world, right? Like, yeah, it just, that really struck me. But then Feyre says, "No wonder he'd been so awkward with me, had no idea what to do with me when I first arrived. But I said quickly, 'You're not your father, Tamlin, or your brothers.' He glanced away and I added, 'You never made me feel like a prisoner, never made me feel like little more than chattel.'" So I have a couple things I want to say about this quote. The first is that last part. I'm like, oh girl, just wait. Wait for the next book, because you will. But also, it brings up this really, and we've talked about power dynamics between Feyre and Tamlin a lot. And it brings up a really interesting point of like very blatantly, I think, at least upon a reread, of we are still dealing with, like, let's say they had a healthy relationship in a alternate universe.
Yeah.
You still have a Fae
Yeah.
who existed during a time when there was slavery,
Mm-hmm.
and a human woman,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like, obviously, we know in real life, like, even back, post Civil War, like, there were interracial couples, right? Like, that existed, but there's still like a power dynamic, right? Like, they still lived in a Reconstruction era where, like, the white person had a lot more rights than the black person. Like, you have that same thing here, right? And I think that's another point in Rhys's favor, because by the time Feyre and Rhys get together, she's Fae. And not just Fae, like, she's at least as powerful, if not possibly more powerful than he is, because she has all the gifts of all the High Lords, including his.
She's just like a fledgling, though. She just doesn't know how to use it yet. But
Exactly. Yes.
Yes.
The potential is there, right? And so, yeah, it's just like one of those little, like, kind of Easter egg moments.
Yeah.
Of like, yeah, they really never were gonna. And I even remember reading for the first time back when I liked Tamlin.
Yeah.
And like thought, oh well, obviously these two are endgame, right? But then being like, yeah, but how's this gonna work out, right? Like, she's at the bare minimum, she's not gonna live as long as he is, right? Obviously, they find a way to turn Feyre and her sisters into Fae.
Yeah.
But at the time, I just remember being like, I don't know how this is gonna work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think this was like a really good hint at it's not. Even when she becomes Fae.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They fucking almost get married.
Yeah. But also what I think is interesting is that Rhys hates his dad, but Rhys's dad is against slavery.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So Tamlin grew up in a house with slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Rhys did not grow up in a house with slaves.
World of difference.
So like that's why I think Rhys and Feyre could have maybe, yes, there was a power dynamic, but there was a different upbringing of like what there was around you.
Values.
Right. And so I think that's an interesting thing to like remember as well, of that it's like there's Tamlin's he's working against a lot of taught stuff. And obviously as a young child clearly understood that like slavery was like wrong, right? Because like his claws are out in this moment. Like he is upset. But yeah, I mean, you bring up a really interesting of just like this power dynamic was never really going to go away. I feel like part of the reason why like it still doesn't work when she is Fae is because I don't believe Tamlin ever views her as Fae.
I don't think so
I think he still views her as that human girl.
1,000% agree.
Right? Because he doesn't want her to train.
Right.
He doesn't want her to learn about this stuff.
Yeah.
That all this new power that she could have.
Whereas Rhys, even though they met when she was human, always has viewed her as a warrior.
Well, and he almost gets like pissed off that he's like, you haven't tried to figure out about any of the powers that like Tamlin is. Wait, what is he? Because also Rhys, I mean, Rhys is also like kind of being like, Tamlin has this like untapped resource that he isn't trying to figure out because he's just wants to keep you as this little human. I also think this quote is extremely sad. Like I literally wrote under "You're not your father, Tamlin, or your brothers. You never made me feel like a prisoner, never made me feel like little more than chattel." I literally wrote under that the crux and the tragedy.
Yep.
This is, to me, the crux of Tamlin's issue, is that he is terrified of becoming his father. He is terrified of becoming his brothers. So terrified that he becomes them and does this to a woman that he supposedly loves. And then that is his tragedy. Like, I just feel like this line is just like, yep, there it is right there.
You know, it reminds me of at a point in my life, I had a really toxic man in my life who also had a very terrible father. And he basically told me one day, I don't have any positive male figures in my life. And like, it still to this day makes me really sad.
Yeah, it is sad.
And I will just say it really showed in that person. But
yes,
what's interesting to me is neither did Rhys really.
No.
Okay. With the exception of Az and Cassian, but like they all grew up together, right? They didn't really have older, positive adult male figures, right? I mean, like, they grew up in the Night Court where the Hewn City is.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, besides maybe that like one guy who trained them when they were kids, I feel like they all really respect that guy.
Yeah.
But then they got separated because people were jealous of their powers, which is fucking stupid.
It's that thing again where it's like it stops becoming an excuse, right? Like, there are people who, we see this all the time in real life, there are people who are given like the worst circumstances that life can throw at you, and they go on to be the most empathetic people. And I think that's this in a nutshell, right? Of like, I think Tamlin, he's too comfortable with his lot in life in a way, right? Like, he's like, I got rid of the bad guys in my life, right? His family, or they were gotten rid of for me. And even though I don't want to be High Lord, he lives in Eternal Spring. He has this manor. He doesn't have to worry about money or really anything. Like, he doesn't own slaves, but he still has servants.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot. Like, I know Rhys has the two sisters, but like, they seem more like the
no, I know. I'm making this face of like, two.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Two.
And they actually, he has tried to get rid of them as servants, and they have like decided, they're like, we find out that they're like, no, he saved us, and like we owe him our lives, and like, and they're like, okay.
Like, okay, cool, you can stay. And like, it's two. Whereas Tamlin, not like, it was made pretty clear before the glamour fell, like, there was quite a few servants about the manor. And then the glamour is taken away, and it's like, to me, it's like, it sounds like dozens.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot, because all of a sudden she's like if you see one or two, okay, but she makes it sound like it's like fucking packed.
Meanwhile, there's at this point like 3 people living in this house.
Yeah. Do you think all these people live in the manor somewhere, or like on the grounds?
Oh, probably probably somewhere on the grounds at least, but like more so like I'm talking like the people who like they're attending to. So there's Tamlin, Lucien, Feyre. That's it. Meanwhile, for the most part, like, Feyre's only been there for a few months. Like, it's really been just Tamlin and Lucien for 49 years.
Yeah.
You know, like, why? And look, I know it's like a big manor, like, blah, 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 but like, it seems like an egregiously big staff. And, you know, especially knowing Tamlin takes tithing money and shit like that. It's like, how well is his staff being paid? I mean, I guess if they're servants versus slaves, and they must be. It's always been this question of like, to me, there's never been a huge difference, and maybe I'm wrong, but like, there's never been a huge difference between slaves and indentured servants, right? Like, the only difference is indentured servants are getting paid a little bit, but like, it's such a pittance that I'm talking about like in the olden days, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, but I would also argue that there's a difference between indentured servitude and then like a staff. I think there's a difference between those people as well.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, indentured servitude is literally like you're getting paid, but you're also kind of paying off like some kind of like debt or like something like that. And how long, like it's almost like more of a punishment.
Yeah.
Right. And then I view staff as more like, you know, Downton Abbey, where it's like it's a good job. It gives you a home and some money.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of respect given to certain roles and certain things, and like that's
but only
kinda,
to a certain degree. Like,
well,
and I
yeah,
think
I mean,
that's
to a
where
certain degree, but yeah,
that's what bothers me with Tamlin is like he doesn't seem to even really acknowledge his staff.
No,
that
it
much.
really, and I mean, I think that really comes into play in Mist and Fury when we have to deal with the whole like things being stolen and all that kind of stuff, and how like kind of easy it is for well, it's not wildly easy, but it's still somewhat easy for Feyre to like win over those guys. Like, you know, well, because also the whole fact that he's fine with all these people being invisible to Feyre, like it just, that comes back to what I said before of like the respect of his staff and the respect that goes both ways. Like it feels so like
it's disrespectful.
It just feels so icky. And again, it's like this guy, it's so confusing to me because like he hates his dad. He hates how all these things happen while he was brought up, but like he's not doing a wild amount to change. Like I mean, we talked about it in the last episode of just like he's so that dude of just, you know, it's not great, but it's just how things are done.
It is like, what it is.
What the fuck? That is not what? No. You can turn into a beast, bro. Like
there's literally magic.
Swing your power around, brother. Like, come on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's again, this is all it's playing to his character. And I think what's just been so mind-blowing is rereading this and seeing how much Sarah J. Maas really hinted at all of this, all of what's to come so early on. And obviously, you know, she builds upon it, of course, but like there's just a lot more here than I even anticipated. And it's like, dude, really blowing my mind.
I know, dude. This is like, I was talking to Jeff about it last night of just, you know, Ariel's really going through the whole Fight Club experience right now. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, this book, Ariel and I realized a couple days ago, it's Fight Club. And that once you know the twist, you cannot unsee it. That's why the rewatch situation with Fight Club is fucking wild. And it's the same thing with this. And I said to Jeff, I was like, I keep forgetting that Ariel is literally this is as if she just finished Fight Club and is now watching it again. So she's just like, and the first reread of A Court of Thorns and Roses. You're doing so good, baby girl, because it is rough. Because you're really sitting there. There's a little bit of self-annoyance that I think happens when you're rereading. You're how did I not see this? Or why did this seem like a good thing the first time around? Like that's what really got me in the reread the first time ever. Was just like, how was I okay with this? But it's so wild. I mean, it's this whole idea of like, if you show a particular thing, image before another one, and then you show a different image before that exact same image, like how you view that second image for each time will be different. Feel different.
Oh, the Kuleshov effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? That's the film term.
Yes. It's very much a film term.
The big example that like I remember learning in film school is like Alfred Hitchcock actually like showed like this example. It's like footage of Alfred Hitchcock looking into the camera, completely neutral face, right? And then the first image they show is him looking at the next shot is a baby, just a cute little baby. And then the shot after that is Alfred Hitchcock smiling, right? And you're like, oh, that's a sweet man viewing a cute baby, right? Then they re-edit it. So same image of him looking completely neutral face. Then it's an image of a woman in a bikini. And then it's him smiling. And then you're like, oh, that's a gross, creepy old man. Yeah. Like it's that thing. Yeah. So yeah, the Kuleshov effect, I feel is such a good example, like a perfect way to put this of like, and you know, funny enough, I was talking to David kind of about the same thing the other night of like, why did I think Tamlin was good the first time. And I think part of it is, especially if this is your first like dive into romantasy.
Yes.
It is Sarah is purposely playing on the idea that she knows you're gonna think these two are endgame.
Yeah.
Like she wants you to think that.
Yeah.
And so it's like you are like Feyre, you are convincing yourself,
yep,
this is good, and there's just enough good and just enough glamour on it, right?
Nice.
See what I did there?
Yeah, I did.
To go, okay, yeah, like everything looks good on the surface, cool, until you dig a little bit deeper.
Yep.
And then you're like, oh, it's actually really bad.
Yeah.
But it's what makes this series so good.
It's like, so incredible. So incredible.
I think the annoyance and all that, it's part of the it's part of the process. Like, and that's like every so often I'll read something and be like, God fucking damn it. Like, I can't believe it. And then I'll be like, but wait, this is actually a great experience because like as a writer myself, I know, different writing, it's screenwriting. Like I actually just wrote a couple of scripts really. Yeah. Where I'm playing with expectations where like I want you to perceive certain characters a certain way at the beginning of the film, only to have a big old twist in the middle.
Yep.
And then go back and rewatch it a second time and go, oh, that's where it was hinted at. Yeah. That's what good writers do. Yeah. Not to, toot my own horn, but
yeah. No, you can toot. You can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, wow. Wild.
Well, great pairing. Yeah. This was fun. So next week we're actually going to do a bit of a shorter read. It is a little packed. We're only going to read chapter 25. Yep. Just the one chapter.
Solstice.
It's the solstice, which funny enough, the week we're doing that in 2 days. That'll be almost the solstice, the actual summer solstice. So that's really funny. Did not plan that.
I love that for us.
I know, right? So we'll be covering solstice, the last happy times really between Tamlin and Feyre.
Yeah. We split it up this way because we knew we had to do 3 days of recording this week. And also what's weird is it's the solstice and then it's the Rhys visit. Yeah. And then Tamlin sends her away. And we just felt like this breakup was like the best way to like do it. So
yeah, I'm excited for it.
Me too.
It's gonna be great. If you haven't already, we would love it if you could subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. It really, really helps us get out to people, like especially if you're trying to convert people into the Maas cult. This is a way to do it. You can also follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Cauldron Save Us Pod. And you can email us at cauldronsaveus@gmail.com if you want to pop in and say hi.
Thanks for being here, Serial Squad.
Thank you for being here. We're going to get, like, I know we don't have a definitive answer on the glamour, but by the end of this podcast, hopefully we will have some kind of a conclusion.
Yeah. So. If not, we'll just decide that Ariel's thing is canon and we'll just move forward.
Exactly. There we go.
All right.
I'm game for that.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, as always, you're welcome.
And we're sorry. Bye.
Bye.